Hello class, welcome to your learning today. I'm just going to move myself up into that corner so that you can see the PowerPoint. Today we're going to look at conjunctions and how you can use them in your writing confidently. Now, what is a conjunction? Because we use them all the time, but we don't always understand what they are. A conjunction is a word used to extend sentences so that they are no longer a simple sentence. But what is a simple sentence? A simple sentence only contains one clause. So the example that I've given you is, the wolf sat down, full stop. And a clause is a group of words that make up a sentence. A clause must have a verb in, and we spoke about this in Tuesday and Wednesday's home learning. So let's go over that again. You have a clause, which is a group of words that make up a sentence. It must have a verb in. That sentence is a simple sentence if it only contains one clause. To make it longer, and so it's no longer a simple sentence, we have to use a conjunction. Co-ordinating conjunctions are one of the types of conjunctions that you might use. They help us to add another clause onto the first clause. So you would have the first clause, the coordinating conjunction, and then the second clause. And the second clause must relate to the first clause. So they have to be about the same thing. And they must also both make sense when they stand alone. So if you say them both separately, they must make sense on their own. So the wolf sat down and he fell asleep. Let's check that the clauses make sense on their own. The wolf sat down, full stop. That would make sense on its own. He fell asleep. That would also make sense on its own. However, if we got rid of the pronoun he, fell asleep, full stop, that wouldn't make sense on its own. So it's really important that that pronoun is there to make sure we have a first clause and a second clause that both make sense on their own. One way that we can remember coordinating conjunctions is by saying Fanboys, which stands for and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. The coordinating conjunctions that we use mostly are and, but, or, and so. So let's have a go at making sentences using coordinating conjunctions. So I'm just going to exit my PowerPoint so that I can move around the sentences and the conjunctions. So the first one I've done for you. The bird was arguing and he couldn't hear the cat. Let's check that the clauses make sense on their own. The bird was arguing, makes sense on its own. He couldn't hear the cat. That makes sense on its own too. And I know that because I've got that pronoun at the start. So I know that is successful. Now I can see some of my second clauses, like this one here, couldn't hear the cat, and this one here, didn't notice the cat. They haven't got pronouns. So didn't notice the cat doesn't make sense on its own, and couldn't hear the cat doesn't make sense on its own either. So I already know that I can't use those as my second clause. He didn't notice the cat. That makes sense on its own, so I can definitely use that as my second clause. Let's check it makes sense with the conjunction and. The bird was arguing and he didn't notice the cat. That makes sense. I wonder if a different conjunction will make sense. Let's have a go. The bird was arguing, but he didn't notice the cat. That kind of makes sense, but I think that there's more conjunctions that will make more sense. The bird was arguing, so he didn't notice the cat. Oh, that makes sense. Let's try the other two. The bird was arguing, or he didn't notice the cat. That doesn't really make sense. Let's try the last one. The bird was arguing, yet he didn't notice the cat. That doesn't really make sense either. So really, the conjunctions that make sense with these two clauses are and, or, so. Let's have a go using different clauses. Peter grabbed the rope is my first clause. And I've got 4 different second clauses, and I'm going to see which ones make sense on their own and which ones don't make sense on their own. Could capture the wolf. That doesn't make sense on its own, so I'm going to move it down the bottom so that I know it doesn't make sense on its own. He could capture the wolf. Well, that makes sense on its own, so I'm going to put that up here and then I'm going to choose my conjunction. Peter grabbed the rope. I think so is probably the best conjunction for that one. Peter grabbed the rope so he could capture the wolf. Oh, that was a good sentence. So I've used that one, so I'm going to check the other clauses left. He didn't know what to do with it. That makes sense on its own, so I'm going to put that clause up here. And then I'm going to move the picture out of the way. Peter grabbed the rope, something he didn't know what to do with it. I think but is the best conjunction here. Peter grabbed the rope, but he didn't know what to do with it. That makes sense. Let's have a go with this last clause. Didn't know what to do with it. Oh, well, that doesn't make sense on its own. It hasn't got a pronoun in. So we've only been able to make 2 sentences again. Peter grabbed the rope so he could capture the wolf. And we made Peter grabbed the rope, but he didn't know what to do with it. Let's have one more go. Grandfather grabbed Peter's hand and. Now, let's remember that we need the pronoun. So let's read all of the clauses and get rid of the ones that don't make sense on their own. Told him about the wolf. That doesn't make sense on its own. So let's put it down the bottom. He took him out of the meadow. That makes sense on its own. Let's see if it makes sense using that conjunction and. Grandfather grabbed Peter's hand and he took him out of the meadow. That makes sense. So that time I had the first clause, the conjunction, and then I put the second clause on. That's different from the first time where I had the first clause, the second clause, and then I picked the conjunction. You can do it either way that works best for you, but remember to write the whole sentence. Grandfather grabbed Peter's hand and, well, there's took him home, which doesn't make sense on its own, or there's he told him to be safe, which does make sense on its own, so let's check that it makes sense. Grandfather grabbed Peter's hand and he told him to be safe, and that makes sense on its own. I really hope that this video has helped you to understand how to use coordinating conjunctions. Try your best and see how you do. See you soon!